So I suppose there's no point in really us going back over material that we've gone over before in terms of precariousness and all of that, and I think we've fairly covered that base. But I suppose just to begin with, we're going to refer to a few things in the presentation and just to say what they are and what they're about. So we're talking about, I suppose, a number of projects that have been sort of supported by ACE, which is the Adult Continuing Education at UCC, in collaboration with other agencies, including Dennis here with the Cork EDB and now Cork City Council and Siobhán in Ballyphehane, Toker. What's after that? CDP.
Leading the Barney. Leading the Barney.
So basically, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to refer to something called Breaking the Barriers, and Breaking the Barriers is a small report that Siobhán and I have been involved with another colleague, and basically we did interviews with 10 women in mostly Knocknaheeny area on the north side of Cork City, which is a very economically deprived area. And this was coming back to them I think we did the interviews in around 2013, 14 I think, and they had taken outreach adult education courses in the 1990s. So we were saying, where are you now, what's happened, and has this had an impact on your lives? And I suppose what we discovered was that in all of them, in every single case, it had made a huge impact on their lives personally. They had finished these part-time courses. They had gone on to full-time courses. One of the interviewees was an academic in a third-level institution. All had encouraged their families, their kids, to stay in education and go on to further education, higher education, so on and so forth. They got their siblings into education, they got their friends in the community involved in education, and they became, I suppose, kind of champions for education in their communities. So I suppose that was the thing that was really striking about it. And in this quick presentation, we just want to put up some of the reports, some of the kinds of things that they said in terms of their initial experiences of engaging with the university, which they found. I came to the university myself as a mature student, and I completely empathise with her feelings here about how intimidating university is to engage with. So I suppose, well, basically, in terms of this precariousness and this whole thing, it's not just about money. We're just making a point. It's not just about money. There are cultural values and norms and so on and so forth at play here. So it isn't just about resources and money, but that is a huge part as well. And one of the projects that Dennis and I were involved with, we discovered that very, very quickly when we ran a women's studies course in Knocknaheeny, that the women on the course didn't have any money, literally no money. They couldn't contribute €1 towards fees because they didn't have €1 to spend. Which gave us a little bit of a shock to us, really, that this was exactly where they were. But when we investigated and we discussed it with them, that's exactly where they were. So I suppose one of the things I suppose we see here in the quote, which maybe you find hard to read there, but it just gives a sense of how these people feel so excluded from the whole university experience and how alien they found the whole thing to begin with. And just in case people find it hard to read this, I found myself at a university, UCC, and that is really for rich folk and for middle class people. I felt as if even the walls were saying, you do not belong here. So, it's not a question just about money or whatever. There's a whole sense of these are middle class institutions set up for middle class people, and we have no business in these places. And the second quote here again brings home this concept, and there's quite a long quote here about how this woman was feeling. But when I was at UCC in the beginning, I expected a gentle tap on my shoulder and someone saying, you are the wrong person to be here. And I think if we had the full long quote, she recounted how one day the head of department of the programme that she was doing was coming into the class for some reason, and she genuinely thought they were coming to throw her out of the class. So when she saw the person at the top of the room, she got a fright and said, "Oh my God, they've discovered me, and I'm going to be dropped out now." And then I suppose this, the next one is the sense that this isn't something from the 1990s. This is something from 2017. So it's still the case. And CIT there, which is UCC is our university, University College Cork. CIT is Cork Institute of Technology, which is also a third level institution. And the point I suppose we're making here is that people in the community don't imagine that UCC or CIT are a place for them to go. And I suppose what we've been trying to do in the last while through the Learning Cities project and through these our two pilot learning neighbourhoods is we've tried to break down those barriers, and we want people to begin to normalise their relationship with the university so that the university becomes a normal part of their lives and it's not mysterious or distant or whatever, that it's just part of their community, it's part of their experience. And I suppose we want to try and do that right across the whole life cycle. And you'll see some of this stuff later, some of the pictures and things, and some of the things that Siobhán would say. You'll just see some of the things we've been trying to do in relation to that.
I'll jump in there and just to expand on that quote, that sense of dislocation that people today still feel. The wider kind of quote from Teresa there is that about children growing up in the area and feeling that there's no hope. And from other women that we met in the area, one of the interviewees said that she felt a feeling of helplessness, of being left behind, and of this total lack of connection to the educational institutions at higher level in the city. Now there have been lots of efforts over many years to tackle educational inequality, but it remains persistent, and there's an awful lot of statistical research that's been conducted by the OECD, coming out of census research in Ireland and research in the UK, that documents that persistence and documents the connection of educational attainment to class, and in particular levels of attainment by children connected to their parents' occupation, and their parents' income levels and their parents' professions. And also what we'd see in our research, and that will be replicated across many areas, is the geographical concentration of deprivation and of inequality. And also the socio-cultural factors. Gibson earlier was talking about cultural issues around masculinities and the value of different occupations. There'd also be issues around low self-esteem, limited self-belief, lack of self-confidence. And what really emerges from the Breaking the Barriers report as well is negative past experiences of education, and this sense of education not being for them at all levels, across the primary right up into later levels. So what we wanted to start to look at is how the university can respond to this sense of dislocation, and the responsibility of the university to do so. So we drew on a really interesting article by Harwood, who with her colleagues is looking in Australia at and has conducted research with young people who are very excluded from education, and young people who live in disadvantaged areas, young people who are refugees, and Indigenous Australian Aboriginals as well. And they argue, along with what we would say, is that there's a moral responsibility of universities to recognise and respond to educational precarity. And one of the things that they talk about in their article, and that comes out from their research, is what they see as an importance of identifying with the university as part of the we of the university, and that those young people who aren't able to do so, and we could say there's many people across the life course who aren't able to do so, it's bound up with a sense of not belonging to education in general, and bound up with experiences of poverty and disadvantage, of stigmatisation, of being depicted as being maybe lazy or not able to engage, a lack of familiarity with higher education and the university sector. And I think, though, it's also really important to point out who the university considers to be the we in the university as well. So I think there's quite a typical depiction of the university student, their background, and their age as well, that managers and maybe many academics themselves would identify as the cohort of the that they would deal with. And so I suppose Harwood would argue that people with precarious relationships to education are not addressed by the university. And they draw on Judith Butler's distinction, and I was interested to hear Joe speak of Judith Butler as well, distinction between precarity or precariousness, if I can say that word, in terms of social vulnerability and exposure, but also as a process, an ongoing process of precaritization, and in education how that's connected with intergenerational disadvantage, the consequences of neo-liberalism that we've been talking about, cultural stigmatization and exclusion. So I suppose this paper, along with Harwood and other writers in this area, are trying to consider how to build a more responsive, a reflexive model of the university, and to consider how to build connections with people at various points, because Harwood et al. Would say that if participation in university is to be established or maintained, this connection needs to occur at varying points for people. Other writers, Perry and Francis in the UK, would argue that education needs to actively include working class people by recognising their agency and enabling people to exercise more control over their education as well. So there's emerging research in this area. I'll hand back to Séamus again.
Yeah, so I suppose building on that point about people having agency, in terms of I think we might have mentioned this last year, this idea of reflexive activation, where we're looking at the idea that rather than having top-down models telling people what's good for them, that we allow people the agency really to say, well, what do we think we want to do? So I think in some levels, universities and I suppose other education providers see themselves as being problem solvers and saying we can come here and we can solve your problems for you. So just listen to us. We know what we're doing. We know best, and we tell you what to do. What we want to try and do is to try and escape from that, and it's not easy to do that. It's easy to say it, but it's quite hard to do it on the ground. And so I'm saying, okay, we want to respond to what you see as your needs, and there's a lot of complexity in there because very often I find that people involved in university third level education are in adult education and outreach and so on, but they're very conscious of sort of a job readiness, creating, giving people opportunities to get jobs and be ready for jobs and so on and so forth. And they have a very particular idea about people from socially disadvantaged areas and economically disadvantaged areas. What would they want to do? They will only want to do jobs that are manual jobs, I suppose, that's one thing, or jobs related to the social sciences. They won't want to do anything else. So they wouldn't want to, to work in, maybe software development or in medicine or anything like that. These people, So what's different about those people? Why are people in those communities so different to the rest of the population? Why do we make assumptions about people? And we also make assumptions that increasingly, I find it extremely frustrating, that learning for the sake of learning and learning something because you enjoy learning it and because you want to know about it is something that's wrong. I thought this was one of the things I really enjoyed about Gibson's presentation this morning, when he started talking about Descartes and he went off on this thing about finding the souls. I was delighted. I was thrilled by that because he's saying, okay, it's not a straight line here. It's not just all about what I'm trying to present in the paper. There's a wider picture here. And those things are really important. It's really important for us to understand our community, our society, and so on and so forth. So for us, it's sort of about being useful in the context, rather than us trying to say, oh, we've all the answers for you. So what ACE is trying to do, I suppose, we've tried to come up with a new vision of what we're trying to do, which of course is very blurred there, which is probably just exactly where we are as well. not as high sort of definition as we'd like to be. But I suppose one point we're making is a networking university, and what we wanted to capture there was that we would engage with stakeholders. Well, I'm not a big fan of the word stakeholder, but in want of a better word, we wanted to involve in partnerships with people, externally, outside the university, and also internally within the university. So we said, okay, we want to work with people to figure out things collectively and through engagement and discussion and so on and so forth. We want to increase our community engagement. And, you know, we actually, in Cork City, where the university is based, we have a shockingly low level of community engagement, actually. Shockingly low level of community engagement. And we're improving, but our footprint in terms of engagement with the community is horribly low. It's really not where it should be. So we have a huge challenge to improve that. And the third thing, I suppose, is that it's all about partnerships. So I suppose for me, it was important in our organisation, we would stop thinking ourselves as the cavalry coming over the hill and say, okay, we want to work with partnership, we want to work with different people, and stop thinking of ourselves as being in competition. The number of people involved in adult education in Ireland is so minuscule that if every single institution went out flat out every day, there would be plenty of room for everybody, and no need for us to compete. So we should we need to get out of that mindset of competing. So I just wanted to just mention, I suppose, three kind of project areas that we're involved in, and we deal with one of them in a little bit more detail now. The Learning Neighbourhoods project, which is we've just mentioned very briefly, but Siobhán is going to go into a lot more detail on that because Siobhán coordinates that project. And that's in Cork City under the UNESCO Learning City banner. And then we're also starting a project just now called the Weave Project, which is in a peninsula in the southwest of Ireland, one of the remotest parts of the country. There's a town called Carsabeen at the end of this peninsula, which was in the past the sort of central locus of that whole community. But over time, people start looking east, and they start looking away from the town, and the town is ultimately being hollowed out, and it's becoming basically a tourist destination. And it's had a lot of other connections to the world. I mean, this is the town where the original cables coming from America came into that locality. So the first people in Europe that knew about the American Civil War were people there. They knew a lot of things in the world before anybody else knew about them. So I suppose what we're trying to do is we're trying to revive that area and try to leverage what the university can bring. We can't solve all problems, but we can help at some level. And what's really important is we want to get feet on the ground. We want to get people back to us. We want to get students, we want to get researchers, we want to get academics, and we want to be able to leverage what are the kind of additional things that they have in that community that we don't have in Cork, or that we don't have in Newcastle, or we don't have in other places in the world, that they can leverage and use in terms of research and so on and so forth. And the third area is our adult community programs. And I suppose here what we're trying to do is we're trying to, as the same as in the UK, there's a national framework qualifications system, and we're trying to allow people to move up the national framework qualification system, and ultimately, to carry on their lifelong learning journey in whatever direction they see it going. I don't know which one of us was saying this, but we can take a chance. Okay, so again, I suppose what we're trying to do is, rather than us kind of saying, oh, we're safely here behind our walls in the university, we want people to be saying to us, we want to demand from you. We want you to do things. And that forces us to do things, but also creates leverage within the institution. Because if the community is saying, we want this, it makes all our jobs easier in the university, because then we're saying we are responding to demand. And the partnership model, so it's about partnerships, it's about people working together. It's about, again, I suppose, engaging with communities and getting communities to think about what they want from the university and for them to identify their own needs and the direction they're going. And that actually can be quite challenging. We discovered this with the Learning Neighbourhoods in terms of what we think might be useful and what people in the community might think is useful aren't the same. Surprise, surprise. So sometimes you know, it can be quite difficult to negotiate that, because with the Learning Neighbourhoods, for instance, we had a lot of people who had volunteered to give lectures and workshops. And then we go to the community and they say, well, we're not interested in that. So you kind of go back to the person and say, sorry, you're not wanted. So that creates that problems for us within the institution as well, because people are volunteering and say, I want to do it, and then say, well, you're not wanted. So sometimes there's a bit of negotiation. You have to go back to the community and say, listen, can you... This idea of identifying educational needs throughout the life cycle, and that was interesting, and Siobhán alluded to it, but like one of the things is that our breaking the barriers showed that you know, by engaging with adults you can change the environment, but if you take it from at an individual level, you take somebody who is disadvantaged in their education at the beginning of their lives, they're always going to be playing catch-up. No matter what happens afterwards, they're further behind. And I'm an example of that myself, because I came to the university as a mature student, and I found myself 8 or 10 years behind all my peers. And that was for the rest of my life. And like, in full terms, I'm very successful, you know, but you think about it, people are disadvantaged for the rest of their lives, and they're always behind where they could or should be. And then, I mean, the intrinsic value, I mentioned that already, but I think we've become totally obsessed with fitting people into jobs. And we know for certain that the jobs and the job market is going to constantly change. And there's nobody that's going to come out trained in a job in 2017 that's trained for the rest of their lives. It's impossible to imagine that kind of a scenario. So why are we trying to create these boxes and trying to force people into these boxes when we know the boxes aren't going to work anyway? And I mentioned very briefly the reflexive activation idea, and our idea of the reflexive activation is that the people themselves have to have agency over their own education, and it's not a top-down. One of the first meetings I had with in community with the city council people back 4 or 5 years ago, they were explaining, they were talking about all these men who were unemployed, and they were putting them all doing forklift driving courses, every one of them. So the idea here is that Amazon is going to shift its entire global operation to Cork, and there's going to be demand for 5,000 forklift drivers. You know, the only positive side of it is that the men probably had a bit of fun driving forklifts. But apart from that, there was nothing to be gained out of this nonsense. So it's important that, you know, that we don't come up with plans and say, this is the plan for you now, you have to follow this. Okay, so look, very briefly, because I realise we're really probably pushing the envelope here in terms of time. The Learning Neighbourhoods project is fitting within what we would call the sort of learning environment in Cork City in general. And it is a very interesting project. It's a very interesting environment. And if we had more time, we could talk a little bit more about it. But like all the people here, 6 people here, are all involved in that project in one way or another. And I suppose the thing at the top is kind of the linchpin, the thing that really, I suppose, enabled the culture to shift in a significant way is the Lifeline Learning Festival. And that's now in its 13th or 14th year. Started from a very, very small base, and now has 500 events, free, open to the public, right across the whole educational spectrum, everything you could imagine, for a week each year. But one of the thing about it is that has no resources. You know, it's a tiny, minuscule amount of resources, so there's no resources to fight over, which is a useful thing. everybody is involved in it because they feel they can contribute something to it, and it gives people a focus to collaborate and work together every year. And that Lifelong Learning Festival was critical in the awarding of the UNESCO Learning City to Cork. It's only one of 9 cities, 12 cities, globally 3 in Europe, one of them is Swansea, actually, which was mentioned already today, I think, by somebody. So that Learning Festival was critical to that. And the Learning Neighbourhoods is part of the UNESCO Learning City project. And the other one, which Dennis is more about, I don't know if we'll talk about that tomorrow, is the EcoWell project, which is again, it's a way of thinking as much as anything else. And the letters in EcoWell are EC is for environment and economy, CO for community and culture, and the well for well-being and lifelong learning. So there's a whole lot of things there, but the idea is that all of these things should be linked up together, and they shouldn't all be in separate boxes. So you should, all of these things work together. And amazing as it might sound, it works, and a lot of very exciting things happen under the EcoWell banner. And one of the things that really astonished me was one of the first EcoWell events was in the City Hall. And I turned up to this thing out of a sense of duty. I was sort of rather go to this thing. And I went into the room and it was full. There were 500 or 600 people. And they were from every imaginable place in the city. And they all said, oh, we want to be involved in this project, which is really amazing. And I think the Lifelong Learning Festival has been one of the critical things in creating all of that dynamic. But we can talk about that another day.
Great. So I'm going to finish off by just speaking a little bit about learning neighbourhoods. I've brought a couple of our reports as well that they can be flying around the place as I speak. Séamus briefly mentioned there the UNESCO Learning City Award. Cork City received it in 2015 in recognition of its commitment to lifelong learning, especially through the Lifelong Learning Festival. And I suppose out of that then, in this collaborative approach, it was decided to pilot and to trial out this Learning Neighbourhoods programme. It started off in 2 neighbourhoods in the city, one on the north side, one on the south side, both quite disadvantaged in different ways. Knocknaheeny on the north side, it's the site of Apple Computer's European headquarters, where thousands of people are employed. But no profits are made, of course. Yeah, about here. Yeah, 0.0005% of tax or something.
It's a good corporate example, you're not looking for altruism.
Yeah, exactly. And this is an area myself and Cathal have also done a lot of research on regeneration in that estate, because there's a big regeneration programme going on. It is a social housing estate with the highest youth population in the city. About 40% of the residents are under 25, but very low level of education. In contrast to that, then Ballyfahan in the south side of the city is a much older population. It was one of the first social housing areas in the country, I believe, or in the city anyway. City for sure, yeah. A much higher, older population, but similar levels of educational disadvantage. In both areas, about 30% of the population have no education beyond primary level. That's very concerning in a young population in Knocknaheeny, but in an older population it also shows the educational inequality of our country and that historical legacy of exclusion from education. So we piloted learning neighbourhoods last year, and it's since expanded to 2 new neighbourhoods, and we've stayed involved with both Knocknaheeny and Ballyfahan, and we're keeping that north side, south side negotiation going on, so we have 2 north side neighbourhoods now and 2 south side neighbourhoods. Collaboration is really key, and we started off, I'll just pass these around as I'm talking. We started off with public engagement exercises in both neighbourhoods, and they were really well attended, and kind of started us off, I think, on a really strong footing. And from those we set up coordinating groups with members from community, to use that term again, stakeholders. And I suppose what it shows, this level of disadvantage in both areas is really tackled and mitigated by this really active learning communities with a great diversity of organisations that are trying to work together to tackle various issues. The agenda then for Learning Neighbourhoods was very much shaped by regular local meetings with people and drawing on the approach of the Cork Lifelong Learning Festival. So We have 3 main partners, although we're hoping to expand to Cork Institute of Technology as well, in the kind of overarching kind of approach, including Cork City Council and the Education and Training Board, and then many local community and education organisations. I think at least 20 maybe or more across the 2 neighbourhoods have been involved in the programme, and we kind of came up with this definition of what a learning neighbourhood is, and it really aimed to be a very positive, celebratory approach to lifelong learning in the city, and to the university connecting to communities that it's had very little relationship with over the past number of decades. So our activities included supporting and promoting the already existing and ongoing neighbourhood learning events and programmes, networking and connecting groups together, and then developing these new initiatives to start to embed the university more in the areas. So out of, I think, about 60 or 70 academics who got back to us, we had done this call about, we're going to be working on the Learning Neighbourhoods programme. If anyone wants to engage with us, we'd be delighted to hear from you. And about 60 or 70 academics got back to us from all colleges in the university. And when we went to our local coordinating groups and spoke about it, in the end 25 ran, which was fantastic. We held lots of different events at the Lifelong Learning Festival last April, and there was an amazing open morning held in Ballyfahan to celebrate the learning that goes on in the community. We ran a very positive Faces of Learning campaign. It was to showcase and document the wonderful learners in the communities already, and to show that learning happens at all ages, in all places, and to kind of bring back that sense of self-esteem, I suppose, to areas that have felt very stigmatised by the wider city at times. And I'll just show you some pictures of what we've been doing, and also ran a STEAM education programme, which is a science education programme in 5 schools in the north side of the city. Many of these happened because of sponsorship, so the partnership approach extended out to some businesses and other agencies who helped get these off the ground, because again, like Séamus mentioned with the Lifelong Learning Festival, we do run on a shoestring. So the neighbourhood lectures, one of the quotes that struck me from the Breaking Barriers report came from a woman. All the names we put up there, by the way, were anonymised, so are their pseudonyms for people. But Katie, in Breaking the Barriers, said that she felt that nothing destroyed the barriers so much as lecturers coming into the community themselves. People going to the community made a big difference in breaking down that sense of dislocation from the university. So we continued that with our neighbourhood lectures, but we also brought people to the university as well to drive that sense of familiarity. So this is a picture from the Aula Maxima, which is our kind of great hall, I suppose, in UCC. And we had about 120 school children from both neighbourhoods that came in for a morning of activities, a lot of participation. This one was on fossils. They had a session on Shakespeare, and they had a session on healthy eating and a variety of different aspects that were going on. And this is a set of images from the Ballyfahan Learning Neighbourhoods open morning. Siobhán, I don't know, do you want to mention anything from this? But it was an amazing event. Hundreds of people came from all different organisations, and we had a number of guests from UNESCO as well, from the Lifelong Learning Institute, who came and were really, they were delighted and amazed, I think, by what's been happening. And it was followed up with, or at that event, there was the workshop.
I suppose just the top picture is one of our local radio presenters who agreed to be MC for the morning. I follow her on Twitter and thought it was worth asking, and she said yes. But you have the youngest learner from our community creche and the oldest learner who's attending the daycare centre, and she actually was 100 the following week, so she's as old as the nation. So there was quite a strong historical kind of element to it, as you'd imagine, in 1916 in Ireland. The second group down is a group of arts and crafts women who would stitch the world for you. And, you know, I think of Audrey Lord, and I think of those, you know, you cannot demolish the master's house using the master's tools. They would take a crochet hook to it and have done several times. And the group in front of them are young primary school children. And it was it's called an Astra program. It's about education, and it's imagining role play and dress up as part of education. But because they're that bit older children, costumes don't come in their sizes, and sometimes because children have very different weights, it was difficult. And the costumes that they could get were princes and fairies and queens, and so the older women attended the school for about 6 weeks in advance of this, made the costumes, and on the day we had I don't attend many of these. We had a fashion show, and so the kids modelled their. So it was about imagining, and there were fairies and queens, but there was a surgeon, there was a Garda, a police officer, there was a lollipop lady, there was an army person there. So it was a way of them of walking into maybe what this might be like. So that's the idea of university, imagining university. And then that was the basis for something that was created collaboratively, how to build a learning neighbourhood. So you started off from the kind of blank slate and ended up with this.
One of the people in the picture is the woman on the right hand side of that picture is from UNESCO. So I think that was one of the good things about the project. So you have these people working in their neighbourhood, and then you have people from UNESCO coming to talk to them about what they were doing. So it kind of recreated this, this phrase is used, local impact, where people felt they were part of a bigger project, which was really important. And it was one of the things you also did emphasise a lot.
Just briefly, I know time is a factor, but what struck the UNESCO people who visited that day was, and you don't see it in the photographs, is that's in a huge hall, and the hall was full of people of all ages and backgrounds and different interests. So there were stands all around the walls. In the middle were all those circular tables, and it was quite chaotic. And in the middle of it all, a piper, who's also an administrator in Siobhán's project, piped in Mary, who was celebrating her 100th birthday, and the child. So that was, vibrant, energised, interesting, chaotic engagement in learning. The whole idea of a learning city is that a city brings all its resources to bear on learning in all its forms, and that was just one morning where that came to life, and that's what they took away.
I know you're going to kill us, Matthew. I've got like 2 slides left. This poster then was produced out of that workshop, and Siobhán got it printed and it's been distributed around organisations in Ballyfahan, but also we're using it in Knocknaheeny, and we're bringing it to every new learning neighbourhood as well. So it's been a fantastic resource to have. This is the Faces of Learning photographic exhibition. Our photographer there is local to the Knocknaheeny area as well, and learned photography after suffering a stroke at a young age. So he's also an example of somebody who has come through a difficult and transitional time. And we photographed from young to old and produced these pull-ups and then an exhibition. So each of these kind of tiles there we exhibited in the City Hall, and then locally in the 2 libraries in Knocknaheeny and Ballyfahan, and it's going to come to UCC. Well, it partly came to UCC at one point for graduations, and it'll come again hopefully to the library there, and be a roving exhibition as much as we can. Beautifully photographed learners from the very youngest was 18 months going to a daycare centre or an early years setting, and the oldest Mary at 100, and everybody in between, some of whom are in UCC and many of whom are learning in other settings. And then this is the education programme. We engaged with scientists in UCC as well, because of their concern of the lack of science education in primary schools in Ireland, and particularly the lack of opportunities for young people in disadvantaged areas to engage. So they sent PhD students and lecturers into schools, train up teachers in science education, run the programme for up to 10 to 24 weeks, and then hand over, it's called Science in a Box, they hand over a box of resources, all the lesson plans. So that's been running in 5 schools and will be finished within the next month. And it's their first time working with disadvantaged areas. So pushing that boundary for them as well has been really great. We also, I suppose, one of the aims of Learning Neighbourhoods is to recognise the good practice that has been happening. There's been 2 kind of events to do so. Both happened in City Hall. one in the Lifeline Learning Festival, a kind of interim presentation award of recognition by the City Council Chief Executive, Anne Doherty, and then the second one, I think it's just kind of cut off there, presentation of certificates just before Christmas by the Lord Mayor to the Learning Neighbourhood groups. And both were fantastic events. The end of year Lord Mayor's reception also involved the launch of the Faces of Learning exhibition, and loads of the participants came along, and I think it was really affirming opportunity for them. There was loads of selfies taken against their own photographs, and the exhibition really looked absolutely stunning. And also we presented certificates to all the lecturers who had participated in the programme to recognise their contribution. And I think one of the interesting things that came out of it for me, the next day I was up in the library in Knocknaheeny, and we were putting up the second part of the exhibition, and some of the community workers and local residents were over helping out, and they were saying, weren't the lecturers lovely? They were just like ordinary people, really, weren't they? Like, you wouldn't know really in the room, who was a lecturer and who was from the community. And I thought that is another way of breaking down those barriers and that sense of this kind of class divide. So in sum, this is the end of our presentation. I suppose the Learning Neighbourhoods programme from the university side of things, we've really been trying to enhance that partnership between university and communities and engage people who might not have connected before with university, driving that familiarity, trying to break that sense of dislocation, or challenge that view anyway. Through this bottom-up rather than a top-down approach, developing new initiatives and collaborations, promoting and showcasing all the wonderful things that are already happening, but also trying to push the boundaries in some way. And really, just to come back to the Breaking the Barriers report, hopefully to challenge that view, one of our interviewees, Claire, said that UCC felt like a foreign place, felt intimidating. She said it felt infinitely far away, a place for other people, but not for us. Thank you very much.
Quick comment. So I don't know if you've come across the term science shops. And this is a really big thing in, especially in Europe. And I think there's one in Dublin. Is there one in Cork? Because for people who don't know, I think these are a really nice way of universities linking together with people. And I think what you were saying, Séamus, about universities providing answers. And I think science shops still try to provide answers for people, but at least they're providing answers to questions that people are interested in. So basically people can come along and say, hey, scientists at the university, I'm interested in water pollution or whatever. And the idea is that they'll work together to try and find some students who can help them answer the question about water pollution. Or if it's really complicated, maybe apply for some European funding or something to do so. So I think they're a really interesting model of the way that normal people and academics can work together. So
we're all, several of us are involved with.
We follow the card budget.
Great. I think it's really cool, and I think it's really not that common within UK universities, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't know whether it's something to do with the funding model or something, because it's quite hard. How do you fund people's time for that kind of thing? But I think that's something that we can really learn from a lot from those experiences.
I think one of the issues maybe is that universities, like everywhere else, are filling people's time. So you're filling time with risk registers and health and safety reports and 500 other really, really important things that nobody is ever going to read or consult or do anything with. 20 hours of your week is taken total, absolute waste of time. And people could be doing this and a lot more interesting things if they were just given a little bit more space.
Conceptually, these are long-running issues of inequality for sure, but they're leading to precarity for people, and they're leading to cumulative precarity for people, because the lack of educational opportunities is leading to people becoming trapped in low-paid or insecure work and poor health outcomes. There's a big literature on this and how higher levels of education can improve people's life chances. So I think they're two sides of the same issue.
I just got a quick kind of two-part question in the sense of I was struck by the idea of the foreigner and when she was in university, but I was wondering if you had any experience people speak to when you kind of maybe reverse it, when they feel like when they're at university they feel more foreign in their community, so there's a bit of a dislocation and maybe that's something hesitant and but there could be also experience of maybe select certain universities over some universities because of that, because there's the sense of, or maybe not even go to university because they're putting that at risk. And also kind of connected to it, have you kind of came across that? Do you see this kind of exercise and this bottom-up approach as a way of kind of maybe overcoming that barrier?
That's really good.
One of the champions in the Knocknaheeny learning neighbourhood went back to college as a mature student. She remained in the area as a community worker, and I think one of the interesting things that she speaks to is that all of her family have gone to university, all as mature students, not as but she's within that community, stayed within that community, and there was an opportunity because of local policy to employ local people to teach other local people at entry level. So there are community people in Ballyfahan and Knocknaheeny who are teachers as well as learners as well as students in university. So it has helped to square that circle, because the education to escape is the other project.
Your project, Carl, you know, the research project, I think is a, you know, like just maybe tell them a little bit about that, because this Dennis and I were involved in a project first, which was a diploma program. But the students graduated and then they moved on to Carl and Siobhán. So I mean, I think that was a good connection. But just maybe tell a little bit about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's basically an evaluation of a regeneration program. It's sort of finished the first 3-year cycle. We're now hoping to establish the next sort of phase of it. But part of it was a large-scale resident survey, and you know, these residents are fairly sick to the back teeth of people surveying them. So because it's generally surveys that never lead to anything positive from their point of view. So just picking up on the diploma program, there was a cohort of local women who had done the diploma, who were still together, and Siobhán sort of assembled them again and said, look, we have to do this survey. How about we do some research methods training, and you take on the survey as part of your project. Luckily, we were able to pay them a sort of stipend to do it as well. I mean, the benefits were, well, I could see the benefits from our point of view in that we got, what was it, a 74% response rate?
72%.
72% response rate. And I think the benefits for the group themselves, you know, were very tangible as well.
You see, some credibility as well. Yeah. Like the point you're making in terms of, it shows when they knock on the door, there is a value to engaging with the university, you know, because they say, well, God, you know, they had the clipboard in their hand, they were the person asking me the questions. You know?
We did go to our local friendly neighbourhood multinational asking for some sponsorship for iPads, and which would have saved an awful lot of paper mountains
and data entry, but we never
get an answer.
No.
So.
But I think it's a.
They don't have email yet.
You know, yeah, exactly.
We should have sent a telegram.
I think it's a really good question to ask.
It's all Twitter now.
Yeah, exactly. Because certainly we have seen it, and people would say in the local areas, you know, that when their children are educated, they move outside the area, and they get jobs elsewhere, and they're gone. But I think that's breaking down a bit more now, and people want to stay in their areas, especially as they're changing as well. But that sense of that it's been remote to family life, this kind of progression in education, I do think that's starting to be broken down. And we've run some other projects with children and young people, again that kind of participatory action research, and you know, we've just given the young people certificates of participation, and youth workers are saying to me, you know, those are on display now in their houses, you know, that this is really valuable to the families and to the local community. Yeah, sorry, Matthew.